Hey, y'all, nice to be back with you this week. I've got something that's been on my mind, and I wanted to talk about it with all of you. I think that we have lost sight of what it means and what it looks like to be politically moderate, especially as an American. Time and time again, I see mainstream news anchors refer to political candidates as moderate, that in context, I think is just incorrect. And it's not just news anchors. I've seen elected political officials refer to either themselves or others as moderate, that in any normal context just is wrong. And I I want to look into it and see, am I right, or am I completely off my rocker? And so I've been doing some research and I've been doing some looking, and I want to talk about a few things. So as we head into the midterm elections here in America, more deliberately and decidedly left of center politicians have been gaining traction, and they've been gaining electoral victories. Many of these politicians have labeled themselves as democratic socialists, which has immediately earned them with this mark of extremism, even though it's just a label, a descriptive label. And this mark of extremism is somehow a part of the conventional wisdom. And we're not really looking into what they're actually for. You know, I would argue that many of these democratic socialists are much more moderate in their economic and social policies than their so-called moderate opponents. Um, I mean, just because a candidate's positions lie somewhere on the political spectrum between their most right wing and their most left wing peers, just because you fall in the middle of some really left wing person and really right wing person does not make you a centrist. It means you're between them, but it doesn't make you a moderate. So let me let me say this. The first election that I was eligible to vote in, y'all, was 1996. And it would probably come as no shock to many of you, especially if you look at my shirt, that I've never come close to voting for any Republican at any level of government ever. I've considered them all, but to me, every single one of them and the party that they belong in, they've just been morally and socially and economically bankrupt for as long as I've been looking at them, 40 plus years, you know, since I was a kid. And I would argue also that I've never voted for a leftist president. Let me say this again. I've never voted for a Republican for president, which means I've always voted for the Democrats since 1996. And I would argue that every single one of them on the general ticket was a right of center politician. 1996, Bill Clinton, his crime bill expanded the federal death penalty. It led to more prisons, harsher sentences. DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act, refused to recognize same-sex marriages. Don't ask, don't tell. Similarly, in the military, was almost inhumane. Right of center in its in his makeup. When you put it all together, he was a right of center politician. Al Gore, even though he supported and led talks on tackling climate change, he is much like Clinton. The crime and punishment policy, the welfare reform policy, his trade policy, all of that stuff skewed traditionally right of center. John Kerry, 2004, authorized the Iraq War. His fiscal policy was right of center. His support of the war on drugs was right of center, and so on and so on. Even Barack Obama, y'all. 2008, Barack Obama. He still is one of my favorite presidents that I've got to live through in my lifetime. Probably is my favorite, quite frankly. He had lofty liberal rhetoric, but he governed from right of center, y'all. His healthcare overhaul, the one that was, this socialist takeover of healthcare, it was literally the most conservative way to, in any substantive way, fix the healthcare industry. But it was a giveaway to these huge healthcare insurance companies. And it reads and came across as something more built to assist corporate health companies than to help people that are ill. you know it did make, you know health insurance more accessible to more people. That was a fix, but it was a right of center approach to fixing healthcare. He extended the Bush tax cuts. He gave Wall Street a bailout, TARP, if you remember that. He upped the drone warfare program. He deported way too many people, and he enhanced and expanded electronic surveillance and metadata collection. All of that stuff happened on Barack Obama's watch. This big, huge lefty, he was not, you know, pragmatic, right of center. Hillary Clinton, the next time we get a general election without Barack Obama on the ticket, I mean, the Goldwater girl herself, another Iraq war authorizer, a military hawk. She's too lax on Wall Street, just one after the other, right of center. And then you get Joe Biden, y'all. I mean, perhaps the most conservative Democrat that I've ever witnessed in national elected office. And, again, was all for the Iraq war, was all for DOMA, was all for the 1994 crime bill, was all for all of those stringent work requirements and welfare reform. His support of the Affordable Care Act as a very right-wing way to fix healthcare. Joe Biden, right of center. So I was trying to see if my own observations in this regard were borne out in data and facts, or if they were just a result of my own bias, because I felt like this for many, many, many years. And it's just gotten worse. And it's gotten to the point where I'm like, am I the only one who sees this? I'm calling a flag, and I want to know if I'm right, actually, under further review. So as I've been looking, y'all, I've come across this website called The Political Compass, and it's fascinating to me because this website tracks politicians from around the world. I think they're out of the UK, these folks, and they sort of place them on a grid, ranking them on their policy positions and their votes, and not what their rhetoric or what their propaganda is. They go to their record and say, where do they fall on the political spectrum, you know? And so the thing that's interesting about these guys is that they not only map the economic spectrum of liberal to conservative on the XY axis, they add a vertical axis, and they map a social spectrum from authoritarian to libertarian as well. And that puts a little bit more of a nice framing into really what makes a politician tick. They may be less right-wing but more authoritarian, or they may be more right-wing but more libertarian. You never know, but it gives you a chance to really see where these politicians lie on a spectrum that is quite helpful. So here, I'm going to show you guys this website. They've been around since 2001, so 25 years. And I found this interesting. I'm going to go down here to the USA, and they've been looking at presidential elections since 2004. And so when I go all the way back to 2004, here's their left axis to the right, and then authoritarian at the top, down to libertarian. And look where John Kerry is, right of center, like right in the middle, right where these axes intersect should be dead center, right? A centrist. John Kerry, like I thought, was with his policy positions and with how he votes, he was right of center. Look where George W. Bush is, like more authoritarian and more right of center than John Kerry. Makes sense. But if you were between George W. Bush and John Kerry, it does not make you a centrist. It just means that you're between those two people. Yeah. Look at 2008. Nah, I don't want an ad. Okay. 2008. Let's see. Okay. Okay. So here's the general election. Look, there's Barack and Joe. Again, slightly right of center and slightly authoritarian, where the Democratic Party has been for decades. Look at where John McCain and Sarah Palin are, all the way over here, all the way over here. And you've got a few folks kind of centered around. Do they have? Yeah, look at this. Here is from the primaries. All of the blue is basically where it makes sense to me where the Democratic Party would be. Hillary and Barack and John Edwards and Joe Biden and Bill Richardson and Chris Dodd. You got Dennis Kucinich hanging out over here. I actually liked Dennis Kucinich for a while, but all of the Republicans are way further right, and most of them are further more authoritarian in their views than the Democrats. Again, it makes sense to me, y'all. So that was 2008. Go to 2012. Look how far Barack has shifted since 2008. Now that he's actually president and doing things that are more right of center than what he was talking about with his liberal rhetoric, they've got him almost right next door to Mitt Romney. There was practically nothing separating Mitt Romney and Barack Obama in 2012 in the general election, except for rhetoric, And then we get down here, yeah, similar stuff with the primaries. That was 2012. How about 2016? Okay, Hillary. Look at this. They've got Hillary as more right wing than Donald Trump, but Donald Trump as the chairman in chief, the authoritarian of his own world, right, is way the hell up there. Does it have any of the primaries down here? Oh, this is interesting. Look at where Bernie Sanders is. How about that? In 2016, according to this, the most centrist candidate by far on the national stage was one Bernie Sanders. And he was my vote, quite frankly, in 2016, especially in the primary. Even after Clinton had cinched it up, I liked Bernie's approaches better. And then all these guys are so far off the reservation, they're almost not even on the map. Let's go forward to 2020. 2020. Let's see. Here's Biden having shifted quite a bit over the years, right? So he's even gotten more conservative and more authoritarian since he ran as vice president with Barack Obama in 2008. And he's all the way over there. And look at Trump. He's still all the way up there. He's moved further to the right since, since he's been president. Fascinating, right? So do they have anything? Whoa. Okay, look at all of these. Look at all of these people. There's Trump way up here. Pence, good Lord. Mike Pence, if he could take a step to the right and be off the map, I think he'd do it and be proud of it. There's Kamala way down, just in over here, still pretty right wing. But look who the most centrist candidates are. Elizabeth Warren. The most centrist presidential candidate in 2020 was Elizabeth Warren. I love Elizabeth Warren. I think she's fabulous, y'all. I really like her because she's an educator, and I respond to that, especially in her messaging. But yeah, look at that. Not a, I mean, Bernie's left of center, but all of them are on the right. That was 2020. Here's 2024. Okay. Kamala and Tim Walz. Again, the Democratic Party has been neoliberal, kind of moderate right wing for all this time, 20 something years, right? And the Republicans have not budged. They've been way the hell up here for 20 something years. So, how is it that people think that Kamala is somehow left wing and way over here somewhere? And the people that are in between Kamala and Donald Trump are somehow moderates. It doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't make any sense. Yeah, and they don't have a primary map for this one. So here's what they have, y'all. They have, take the test. They have this 6-page, I'm going to do it in English. They have this test, and they're going to put me on the map and see where I come out. And so I want to take this. I'll go as quickly as I can, but I want to see where am I a moderate? I would guess that I'm going to be in the left of center and libertarian quadrant. But I'm going to go through this because I don't think my approaches to politics are in any way extreme or weird. But let's put it to the test. Let's see, just a few propositions to start with concerning no less how you see the country and the world. If economic globalization is inevitable, it should primarily serve humanity rather than the interests of transnational corporations. That's a big if. But if we really get more global, I would rather serve humanity than corporations, because humans are people, corporations are not. Right? I'm going to put agree. I'd always support my country whether it was right or wrong. Disagree. If my country's wrong, I would say that they're wrong, and I have. No one chooses their country of birth, so it's foolish to be proud of it. Disagree. Be proud of where you're from, of your heritage. You know, that's part of being having a tribe. But we also need to be empathetic and aware of other folks, right? Next, our race has many superior qualities compared with other races. No. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Not necessarily. Military action that defies international law is sometimes justified. Boy, what if international law falls short to meet the demands of a certain situation? That's tricky. I'm going to go disagree on that. There is now a worrying fusion of information and entertainment. I would agree with that too. Commentary and factual reporting sometimes gets tricky to differentiate, right? Okay, page 2. Now we're talking about the economy. People are ultimately divided more by class than by nationality. I'll agree on that. If you're poor, you're poor. Doesn't matter what color you are. Controlling inflation is more important than controlling unemployment. That's tricky. I did not take economics, friends, but I think runaway inflation is more dangerous than runaway unemployment. So I'm going to say agree on that. Because corporations cannot be trusted to voluntarily protect the environment, they require regulation. Well, yeah, corporations, what are they here to do? They're here to serve their investors, right? So if while serving their investors, they have to disregard environmental concerns, they'll do it, right? Because that's their reason for being. So I think they do require regulation, from each according to his ability to each according to his need, quote unquote, is a fundamentally good idea. Um, I don't think so, because some people may not have a physical ability or a mental ability, but they shouldn't be shunned from having their needs met, right? So I'm going to say disagree. The freer the market, the freer the people. I don't think so. I don't think so. Because the freer the market, the more careful you need to be with the market, because there's no safeguards, right? You just take the training wheels off. Let's see. It's a sad reflection on our society that something as basic as drinking water is now a bottled branded consumer product. It is a sad reflection. I don't mind people bottling water and making it available, and even charging for the you know for the trouble, but making a whole lot of profit on something like that, yeah, that rubs me the wrong way. Land should not be a commodity to be bought and sold. I think it's fine. I disagree with that. It can be a commodity to be bought and sold. Just regulate it, right? It is regrettable that many personal fortunes are made by people who simply manipulate money and contribute nothing to their society. That's a little verbose. Um, I I personally, if all you do is like trade stocks, and you make money here, and you lose a little bit there, and you make money here and you lose money there, I consider that the same thing as being a professional person who goes to the casino, and you make bets, you make money, you lose bets, you lose money. I don't think that sort of work has any like redeeming qualities for the rest of society, at least. So I would say it's regrettable. I would say it's regrettable. Protectionism is sometimes necessary in trade. It's a little outside of what I understand, but I'm going to agree for now. The only social responsibility of a company should be to deliver a profit to its shareholders. Well, that's what it is. But I disagree that should. I think that should not be the only social responsibility of a company. So I'm going to say disagree. The rich are too highly taxed. Disagree. Um, those with the ability to pay should have access to higher standards of medical care. To that, I say bullshit. Yeah. Just because you are rich does not mean that you should get a fundamentally better doctor than somebody else just because they have less money than you. I think that's bullshit. Um, disagree. It's probably uh, a real thing. Hey, I've got a whole bunch of money, and that's a real fantastic doctor. I'm going to make sure that they take care of me, and I'm going to make sure that they get compensated for that. That's going to happen, right? But we need to make sure that everybody has access to proper standards of medical care. That's why I'm a disagree. Governments should penalize businesses that mislead the public. Absolutely. Agree. Maybe strongly agree. A genuine free market requires restrictions on the ability of predator multinationals to create monopolies. Okay. A genuine free market requires restrictions on, yeah, we need to restrict these companies so that they do not create monopolies. And in doing so, that will create a more free market. I do agree with that. Okay, next page. We're getting there, y'all. Oh, okay. Personal social values. Abortion, when the woman's life is not threatened, should always be illegal. Strongly disagree. All authority should be questioned. Agree. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Ah, that's from the Bible. Disagree. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Think, think. Be empathetic. Walk a mile in their shoes before you do something rash. Taxpayers should not be expected to prop up any theaters or museums that cannot survive on a commercial basis. Disagree. Those are important parts of society that make it available to people. Art, history, our story, that I think it's important that we all chip in a little bit to make sure that those things are available for everybody. Schools should not make classroom attendance compulsory. I think they should. Disagree. I don't need the ad. All people have their rights, but it's better for all of us that different sorts of people should keep to their own kind. Disagree. Good parents sometimes have to spank their children. No, they don't. No, they don't. No, they don't. James Dobson can go fuck off, right? It's natural for children to keep some secrets from their parents. Agree. Possessing marijuana for personal use should not be a criminal offense. Agree. The prime function of schooling should be to equip the future generation to find jobs. Not the prime function. The prime function of schooling is to better yourself, is to become learned. Later on, if you're in a trade school, that's its function, But a liberal arts college, no, we shouldn't be training people just to be job holders. We should be educating people to make them better people and to make society better, you know? I don't need that. So let's see, it moved me down. The prime function should be to equip to find jobs. Disagree. People with serious inheritable disabilities should not be allowed to reproduce. That's scary. Disagree. The most important thing for children is to learn to accept discipline. Bullshit. Bullshit. It's to develop their bullshit detector, quite frankly. There are no savage and civilized peoples. There are only different cultures. What is savage? What is civilized? When you get down to it, I disagree with this. Those who are able to work and refuse the opportunity should not expect society's support. I disagree with that either. If you're able to work, what is the opportunity? I remember taking a job back when I was in my 20s that should have been just fine. It was working on a like a like a fulfillment warehouse, just filling orders. And my back is so bad. Even when I was in my 20s, I lasted 2 days. Couldn't do it. And if they were like, "This is the job. We're providing you a job," I would be like, "I will not be doing that job." Sometimes you can't. Sometimes the opportunity is not the right opportunity, but it doesn't mean society shouldn't still help us out, right? Collectively, we're better together. Let's see. When you are troubled, it's better not to think about it, but to keep busy with more cheerful things. That's a big flat no. First generation immigrants can never be fully integrated within their new country. Disagree. Disagree. Good Lord. What's good for the most successful corporations is always ultimately good for all of us. Try again. No broadcasting institution, however independent of its content, should receive public funding. Yes, they should. Yes, they should. All that public funding means is that we as a society agree that good independent reporting is worth something to us. So we're investing in that. Page 4. We'll get there, y'all. Our civil liberties are being excessively curbed in the name of counterterrorism. I think that's true. A significant, or yeah, I'm going to agree with that. Sorry. Yeah. A significant advantage of a one party state is that it avoids all the arguments that delay progress in a democratic political system. No, it's good to have disagreements and to catch ourselves and to make sure that we're operating with the best versions of the arguments, right? Let's see. Although the electronic age, ah, what happened? Okay. Although the electronic age makes official surveillance easier, only wrongdoers need to be worried. Disagree. The death penalty should be an option for the most serious crimes. Disagree. I don't like the death penalty. In a civilized society, one must always have people above to be obeyed and people below to be commanded. I don't buy that. I don't buy that. We can be civilized and be colleagues. You know what I mean? Abstract art that does not represent anything shouldn't be considered art at all. Bullshit. Makes you think. Makes you think. In criminal justice, punishment should be more important than rehabilitation. I don't agree with that. It's a waste of time to try to rehabilitate some criminals. I don't agree with that. The business person and the manufacturer are more important than the writer and the artist. I disagree with that. Mothers may have careers, but their first duty is to be homemakers. Disagree with that. That's not their first duty. Unless they choose it to be, right? That's her choice. Almost all politicians promise economic growth, but we should heed the warnings of climate science that growth is detrimental to our efforts to curb global warming. We should heed the warnings. Agree. Making peace with the establishment is an important aspect of maturity. Bullshit. Disagree. Okay, two more pages, y'all. Astrology accurately explains many things. Strongly disagree. You can be moral without being religious. Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, in my own path, I think you can be more moral the more that you move away from traditional religions. Charity is better than Social Security as a means of helping the genuinely disadvantaged. No. Whoa, quit. I guess they got to make money, right? Better than the Social Security as a means of helping the just disagree. Some people are naturally unlucky. Disagree. It's important that my child's school instills religious values. Wrong. Wrong. That is not your child's school's job. Okay, finally, a look at sex. It all comes down to this, right? Sex outside of marriage is usually immoral. Disagree. A same-sex couple in a stable, loving relationship should not be excluded from the possibility of child adoption. Of course. Pornography depicting consenting adults should be legal for the adult population. Agree. What goes on in a private bedroom between consenting adults is no business of the state. Also agree. No one can feel naturally homosexual. Disagree. These days, openness about sex has gone too far. Disagree. Okay, that's it, y'all. Let's see where I stand. I'm curious as to where I'm going to be. Let's see where it puts me. I am down in the green. Firmly down in the green. There you go. So it makes sense that somebody like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren were two of my favorite choices for the last decade to be our president. And that some of these newer democratic socialists have really impressed me with um, their policies, with their rhetoric, with their language, and all of that. I think it's wonderful. But here's the thing, y'all. I think, at least according to this, that my observation that the Democratic Party in America has been fundamentally right of center for more than two decades. That's true. According to this, that's true. And as Trump and the Republican Party just continue to coalesce in their extremist corner and run this country into the ground, it only makes sense to me that voters are going, no, I don't want to vote for the status quo of all of these corporately aligned right of center neoliberal Democrats are talking about. It's these other ones that we want to go with because we need to fix some shit and we need to fix it fast because this is untenable. It only makes sense to me. The way the elections have been going, the way the polling has been going, the way the movement has been going, it only makes sense to me that that's how many voters are making their voices heard. What does not make sense to me is that the media and the politicians themselves seem to have no idea what's going on, or they're intentionally lying to us and misleading us. And quite frankly, I don't know. I don't know which one it is. I don't know. But we need to redefine what it means to be a moderate politician or to be politically moderate. According to what we've done today, it's to the left of the Democratic Party platform, as it has been for the last 20 something years. Fascinating, right? So let me know in the comments what you think. If you have similar thoughts, if you took the test and you found yourself in a different quadrant, I'd be fascinated to see what y'all think. But for today, I think that was a really interesting exercise, and I think I've learned something. So until next time, y'all, thanks for being with me, and we'll see you soon. Bye.